Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Freshly Pressed. Today we have with us the Mac brothers from Melbourne, Australia. Welcome to the show, Aaron and Josh.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing good, and I hope you guys are doing great. It's a bit rainy in Sydney this morning, but I don't know how Melbourne is. How's Melbourne
Oh,
doing today?
we finally got good weather after like a whole week of just storm and rain and clouds.
Wow. And I love hosting Australian guests on the show because for once there's something in my time zone that someone that I can talk to. I'm not waking up at 5 in the morning to talk to. So yeah, thanks for coming on the show. And tell us a bit about yourself. A brief history and how you got interested in comics. In the first place.
I think you should start because you
I should
always have the
start.
more unconventional answer.
I actually have more of a history in music.
Nice.
I've always been, doing something with music, being in bands, either whether it's singing or playing guitar. And comics was something I fell into because I had this story that I wanted to tell, and we had tried every other possible route there was, and none of it was working.
Yep, that's
I
amazing.
I kind of the comic thing was really, it kind of began as just enjoying sort of the medium. Like that was something I started getting really deep into in 2021.
Yeah.
And this, like Gods Among Men here, was a story that we've been sitting on for over a decade. And so I remember one day Josh finally said to me, he said, "Hey, you've been reading all these comic books.
Yeah.
What if we did this story as a comic book?" And it kind of clicked,
Mm.
because we considered film, even things like music to try and tell the story. And yeah,
Yeah.
comics were a really great visual medium to be able to deliver it.
That is fantastic. That is fantastic. And there's always a way to tell a certain story, and it's amazing when you figure out that this is the best possible way that you can tell that particular story, right?
Mm.
Um, awesome. So what kind of comics were you reading at that time, and did you read a lot of comics while growing up?
Stuff.
I read a little bit of comics growing up. Mainly it was the Curse of the Spawn series.
Ah, nice.
That was probably one of the first few comics I read, and then as I got a little bit older, I started getting into the Naruto manga.
Hmm. Hmm.
So those would probably be the two. Other than that, along the way, there was a few like graphic novels I would have read, like Batman: The Long Halloween, Year
Nice.
One, and I was quite into Fable for a
Oh
while.
yeah, the DC
Ah,
Vertigo series.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I
That's
can't even
fantastic.
I can't even say that he's stealing my answers because a lot of the stuff that he read, he would then pass on to me, and I'd read it and I go, oh yeah, that's great.
That's the big advantage of having a brother who reads comics. You don't really need to buy it twice.
Yeah,
There's, there's
it kind of began where he sort of had more of the history with it, but he never
yeah,
went that deep into comic books. And then later, when I kind of came back around, I
yeah,
went, real deep. So I kind of, he would get into Spawn, and then I would say, oh, guess what? I finally collected the entire Curse of the Spawn miniseries, and I've got, over 100 plus issues of Spawn. Um, but I would say that definitely influenced a little bit on how we approach the medium, because
yeah,
one big thing was I loved how a lot of these books would, they were able to explore these themes that could be a bit confronting, but
mm,
because it's done through the comic medium, this sort of it takes you out of
yeah,
the intensity of the situation, and
yeah.
I think we really saw that as a benefit to what we could do in the medium.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Because that's a good segue into, like tell us a bit about the comic book itself, Gods Among Men, and uh, how did you come up with the idea? And obviously, you told a bit about how did you think about comics as a medium, but how did you come upon the idea for the story, and a little bit about the story without spoiling it, of course.
Mhm. Me? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Well, Gods Among Men's a really peculiar case because it's a true crime comic book,
Mm.
and we've classified it as a narco noir, very similar
Okay.
to. I mean, everything I'm saying now, I can see. I'm like, oh, I've got the script right there on the info page. It's yeah, it's people have drawn comparisons to things like Breaking Bad and Train
Mm.
Spotting and even Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Uh,
Nice.
which is, I think, in the comic world, although there is crime, but something like a true crime presented in this way is something a bit different.
Yeah.
And I guess story wise, it's about a sort of young, hopeful entrepreneur who kind of
Mm.
he has a go at trying to make things work
Yeah.
in accordance to the rules, the rules of society and everything, and it's just not working out for him. And when the opportunity presents itself to be able to actually, make things happen or try to find an
Yeah.
alternative means of success, he figures, you know what, like, yeah, I'm just gonna go for it. And this is really it's the beginning, it's the gateway into
Mm.
everything. I think it sets up a really strong premise, but
Yeah.
it's all about what else is to come from this point on.
Mm. Mm. So, how far along have you guys planned the story arc? How many issues do you think will this first story arc be?
First story arc, I think we said 5 issues will get us to the end of arc one. But because of the nature of the story, we know how each arc would occur, will play out after that, and how it will end. And we've actually, in issue one, alluded to a moment that goes beyond arc one as well.
Right. Right. So you're teasing some stuff from
Yeah,
really
yeah.
in things coming in the future. That's fantastic. Now that's a good way to keep people hooked onto your story.
Mm.
Um, did you, like when you is when it was obviously like first time you guys are writing a comic book. So did you have to think differently to creating this? Did you think it up as like a graphic novel or something and then broke it down into chapters, or did you have really like organic points in the story where you felt like this is where the story for issue one ends, and you pick it up from the next one? How do you guys do that?
I think what was interesting was that because this issue one initially was meant to be like a pilot to a TV series. So we had already written a script for it and done some paneling in the way, what do you call that for film?
Storyboarding. Yeah.
storyboarding.
We
Yeah,
had done
yeah.
storyboards, and so we kind of adapted the storyboards to the comic medium rather. And as a result, we get some panels which are probably a bit unusual to see in comics.
Nice.
Yep. So it went from there. We worked off what we currently had.
Hmm.
That's fantastic. So did you like end up using some of those storyboard panels for your comic panels as well?
They were definitely. I think they were a big help for us when we first started working with our artist Ben Sullivan. Because being able to show him what we were trying to convey, or what this scene needs to contain visually. I mean, I did the sketches and they were a bit rough around the edges, but it was enough to be able to convey to him like this is what this scene, this moment needs to capture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. No, I think storyboard is already a visual medium, and it helps you imagine the scene
Mm,
pretty well. And then obviously comics have a very different perspective
mm,
because storyboard is limited to the screen size, and you have to fit things a certain way. And comics, the scene composition is very different, but
mm,
still, like, it just gives you a great reference point to start with.
mm.
I do you guys know like Tim McEwen?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Greener
yeah,
pastures. Yeah.
yeah. I was interviewing him a while ago for Greener Pastures issue 8, I think,
Mm,
Kickstarter, and he's a storyboarding artist by day. That's his profession, and he
mm,
used to do a lot of storyboarding for. I think he did for this guy, the Mad Max guy,
mm.
Miller.
Mark
Yeah,
Sexton.
no, the who's the Miller? Who's the director?
Oh, George Miller. Oh.
George Miller. Yeah, George Miller. He used to do storyboarding for George Miller's
Mm,
company, and like he always, I think his pet peeve is that people always liken comic book panels to like to storyboards, and he's like, no, 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 they're very different things.
mm,
Please, they're very different things, and because he's an artist, he knows the very specific differences between the two. When people compare, he gets really yeah.
it's it, there's always going to be something different. Like I remember when we started, when we first started working on Gods Among Men, it was like, oh, that's great. The script for a comic is very similar to a script for
Yeah, yeah,
film.
yeah.
But then, I remember there was one key moment that we ran into that I was like, oh, this is where it really differs is lettering because with audio, you can just layer it however you want. But with lettering, you've got to think about, the physical space that it's going to inhabit and where the tails are, they can't cross, you know?
That's very true. That's fantastic. That's a very good difference to point out. That's one. There's also the other. There are like so many other things on the panel, right? Like there's speed lines. There's also like the sound effects, things like that. And not just that. Like if you think about it, the way dialogue works in comics is so different to the movies. One is obviously lettering. You have to fit so much dialogue in such little space, but
Mm,
also you have to make characters feel natural within that small space as well. So the way you have to construct your dialogue has to be very, very different from movies and TV.
mm.
So that's quite a bit of work. Yeah,
Well, I think that's something that, we never, neither of us ever formally trained, hard comic book making or anything, or even any kind of illustrative background. But I think we just we did and we learned in the doing, and because now we've got the Anna comic book, which is kind of swung. One's a true crime; it's dark and gritty. The other one's a bit more colorful. It's action. It's manga inspired, and it's like there are times when I was talking to Josh and I said, "Oh, should there be words here?" And he said, "No, let the action have its moment on the page." And I was like, "Yeah, that actually feels." There are times when you need to just let the page have its moment.
that's very, very true. Though that's a great thought, Josh. I think like this is and again, like I'm just referencing some of the older talks I had with other people. A lot of times minimal dialogue or no dialogue at all
Mm,
is something that's required because you need the art, you need the scene do the talking, right? Because it's
Yeah.
again a visual medium. You need to see sometimes. Great. So
I think that reflects a bit of our personality. I'm just here like meow 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 meow. There should be words, and he's like, silence is good sometimes.
Yeah. we swing we swing to both extremes depending on the panel. Sometimes it's very wordy, but especially things like action scenes. I don't like words being there for action scenes. Same way, I don't like films where they're trying to tell you too much.
yeah, yeah. I think the only kind of dialogue that works really well with action scenes is quips, and only Arnold Schwarzenegger can do that.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, he made a great, sort of like that became his iconic style.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I always think about quippy fighting. I associate that with Spider-Man, right? Because he's always making jokes as he does it. But what was interesting was I can't remember where we pulled it up from, but it was like an X-Force comic or something. And Josh was looking at it because we were pulling up references and things for the Anna comic. And Josh is like, "Why do they keep talking so much in the fight? Like just let the fight happen." And it's kind of that thing where you start to see in Marvel movies where everybody has to be funny.
yeah,
And it was like, I'm kind of okay with Spider-Man being quippy because he's got more of a history with it. But then as
yeah.
we were reading like X-Force, it's like, why does everybody have to have a punchline? Like, you guys need to cool down a little bit.
Yeah, I think I wanted the action scenes to be more like John Wick.
Mm,
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. Let the scenes do the talking, and that's a
mm.
great thing. That also because I think when One Punch Man originally came out, there was a lot of criticism about the dialogue being really off and minimal
Mhm.
because it's so action heavy, and the action scenes are drawn so stunningly beautiful in that book. Like you don't actually need dialogue for like half of it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's have you read One Punch Man manga at all?
I've
It's
watched a few episodes of the cartoon, but I haven't read the manga.
yeah. I mean, season one is so good, but season two of One Punch Man is just like it's such a damn squib compared to season one.
Uh,
Yeah,
that's a real challenge that we found as well. Like when you watch an anime, something where there's movement, it's a lot easier to craft this scene. But when you're, restricted by your paneling and they can't move, you really have to think about which ones do you show. So we had to plan out. We show the initial reaction, and you have to pick your moments as to how you convey the movement.
Which manga is
yeah,
really good at doing that.
Mm.
I found because
yeah,
they don't always, I mean, they don't have the luxury of color, so they work with a lot of these dynamics, sort of like the preamp, and then the moment of contact, and then maybe even a third panel to show, like the after effect.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and these are all things we never had to worry about with Gods Among Men because it's a true crime with, would you say, no violence?
Pretty much no obvious violence,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is
Oh,
what
that's
makes
fantastic.
it different. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of implied stuff, and
that's amazing. That's amazing. And I think also in Gods Among Men is a genre story. You don't really need if it's a true crime genre, you don't really need actiony stuff there, right? Unless the story asks you to. But there's obviously manga and other even in manga, right? Like if you read like there's some I know they published manga for Odd Taxi recently
oh,
after the show. Have you heard of that show? It's
no.
Is that a taxi driver?
it is kind of like that. So it is it's a there's a whole genre of anime which is dedicated to animals talking and like behaving like human beings,
Mhm.
and this odd taxi is kind of the story of this walrus who drives a taxi around in Tokyo, and he meets all sorts of different characters. Like he meets these girls who are trying to be like the next J-pop band, and then they make she he they, he meets comedy duo who were trying to be like, they call Homo sapiens, but they're like, one of them is funny, the other one is not, and they're always like fighting about it. And then this guy who's trying to be an influencer, always on Instagram and things like that. So he meets these different characters, and he gets embroiled in this larger conspiracy of like some missing girl, and some mafia guys. So it's a fascinating, anime. And
The
they
manga.
recently the manga is by the same name, and they just released the books after the show got really popular. So it's not very, like, it's not action at all. It's just city life and stills, and like really calm and rested, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
So
It
uh,
reminds me a little bit, even when you talk about sort of this one character that encounters many others, was Josh introduced me to this show on Netflix called Midnight Diner,
I love
which
that show.
it's great. I mean,
Yeah.
because I think it came from a manga, and it
Ah,
was nice to have, obviously, like it's got food involved in it, but a lot of it was about sort of the people and people's stories, and um, it always kind of maintains a pretty mellow tone, but yeah, just some really fascinating, points of writing in there. Which, yeah, that was something for us where it's like, how do you make sure that the mellow tones are still engaging, but then
yeah,
obviously we have the benefit of, there'll be times when the drama starts to climb a little bit as well.
that's very true. That's very true.
So we've got an
That's
intrusive,
actually. Sorry, you were saying?
we've got an intrusive third guest, so don't mind.
That's okay. So that's a good segue into our next segment, where we talk about top five pop culture things that you like. Ta-da!
I've got my list.
Uh,
Oh, okay.
so
We might cross over. So I kind of interpreted when you told me about this. I said, "Oh, okay." My brain likes to make lists, so I just kind of separated them into film, TV, music, video games, and comics.
that's a good idea.
So for film, I said uh, any Christopher Nolan film before Dunkirk, with the exception of I did enjoy Oppenheimer, although I
Hmm.
really enjoyed things like The Prestige, Memento, Interstellar. Um, TV shows, I had to look into my heart, and I think Community and Arrested Development, that
Mm.
those two sitcoms, they just really work for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're
Very
fantastic shows.
quippy. Music, I just went two bands. One is Dream Theater, which is very proggy,
Love it.
and the other one, and I'm not no gun to my head, but it's Anna, which is the band that he plays guitar in, and that we're making the comic for. So that's
Nice.
yeah, that's this one. So I'm,
Woohoo!
I'm
That's
paid
awesome.
sponsorship right there.
By the way, feel
Video,
free to show off print copies for Gods Among Men if you have. So
yes.
yeah,
Um, for video game, I said the Fallout game series. It's sucked a lot of hours from my life. And for comics, I said Spawn, Kiss, Psycho
mm,
Circus, and Batman: The Long Halloween and Batman Year One. Those two story arcs
nice.
I found really, just really well done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Both are fantastic. I loved how Batman Year One was adapted into the recent Batman movie was quite similar to Batman Year One,
Mm.
in a lot of
I
like how
I know
the character of Batman develops. Yeah, you were saying?
Batman Begins also took some sort of inspiration from that storyline too.
Yes. Amazing. That's a beautiful list. Thank you, Aaron. Josh, what about
Organized
you?
structure.
My list is the slightly more unusual one. For film, it's The Dark Knight. Not the whole trilogy, but just The Dark Knight in particular. I think that's not. I don't even see that as a comic book movie. I just think that's one of the best movies ever made.
Yeah,
Um,
have
you
to
could
agree.
remove the comic book element from it, and it'd still be an amazing movie. It was just
100%.
fantastic everything can't praise that enough. In terms of, I've got two TV shows. One is the whole Chef's Table series on Netflix, which
Okay.
they've got different seasons where one's about barbecue, one's about France, one's about pizza, but it's all about these chef stories,
Yeah.
which I really enjoyed that because I don't know, I feel chefs to me are more inspiring than most other creatives because I don't know, I feel like their struggle is it's more real and they're more grounded.
Mm.
They don't have the same kind of to me some of the complaints from say musicians or actors are kind of petty
Yeah.
and
There,
having I've worked as a line cook before, and so I really understand like how difficult it is. I've got a lot of respect for them who go through that.
that's
Another one,
fantastic.
the other show that I like is called River Monsters.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. What's it
It's
about?
it's about fishing,
Okay.
which sounds boring, but he doesn't catch normal fish. He goes after these fish that when you see them, they look like something out of a sci-fi film.
Wow. That's
Yeah, they're
fantastic.
monstrous, and they eat people and stuff like that. And he goes to search for them, and it's real. So, there's no guarantee every episode that he's even gonna get it. It's the most real TV there is. Sometimes he can't catch him. He explains how difficult it is, and when he does, you're along for the ride, and you see these things that you thought only existed in film.
Wow. That's so fascinating.
Um, the other thing, comic wise, I'll say the whole Naruto manga.
Hmm.
That's something that had a really big impact on me. I've never seen storytelling that way before, where they were so sure with where they were going the whole time. And
Yeah.
with every new revelation, it was just fantastic. Like, there's really not much I can fault about it.
No. Neither the manga nor the show. I
Yeah.
think both are fantastic. And
In fact, I'm still following it now that it's gone on to Boruto. So I can't, it's not finished, so I don't want to give my opinion. But so far, I'm happy with it.
nice. Nice.
And
No,
since
you're right. Oh yeah, go for it.
Oh, I mean, since Aaron brought up games, like I'm not really ever been into games, but if I have to pull one game that stuck out to me through my childhood would be Golden X3
Hmm.
on
Nice.
the Sega console.
Showing his
Nice.
age.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not much of a gamer at the moment, but I'll probably show my age when I talk about games.
yeah.
I'll talk about Quake 3 Arena or Doom or something like that, which was like what 20-25 years ago. So
I mean,
yeah,
I prefer how games used to be. I see the way the games he plays now, and I'm like, I don't think games should have a long form to them. You used to play, Sonic the Hedgehog.
yeah, yeah,
Get past this level, there's no save game. You pause it or you go up.
yeah. The game I used to play, again, this is showing my age, as a kid, was called Contra. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
I've played Contra, yeah.
You've played Contra? It used to be that 8-bit game. Yeah, yeah, it was so much fun. Um, Obviously, Space Invaders was one of the early 90s ones that we used to play a lot.
Yeah,
It's still, if you ever go to like iPlay or one of those gaming game zones like Time Zone or something,
yeah,
you'll probably see Space Invaders still there with like
yeah.
those 8-bit aliens.
That's the one
What
with the little
else?
spaceship and you're just going forward. Yeah,
No, Space Invaders is the tank at the bottom, and then there's
And then you
aliens
hit the
down.
aliens. They keep
Yeah,
coming from the top. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
it's
kind of
been
like Tetris, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No, it's interesting that games are kind of starting to move towards because I still keep tabs on what's coming out now, and there's definitely a bit more. There's a rise back again of games that are a little bit simpler. Things that
yeah,
are just they tell a story. The story's not that long. At most it's like 8 hours of gameplay, but it's generally a more simple. I think some people are getting a bit overwhelmed with
Yeah,
being bombarded by like, oh, it's an open world and you can do multiple side quests and you can, and then it's hundreds of hours of gameplay. Like, you just don't have time for that, especially when you get
yeah,
older.
yeah. Very true. Very true. I think like that's where like gaming industry has completely created this new side, which is obviously not new, but like in the last 10, 15 years, they have just emerged with mobile games as a
Yeah.
completely different thing. Games that are tailored to mobile, right? Like that like Candy Crush or Fruit Ninja, or all those games that don't need gamers to, like, it's gaming for the masses, right? Like
It's
gamers
casual.
don't play there. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, Angry Birds has a movie, and it took Fallout how long just to get a series?
yeah, yeah. Exactly. They're like Maccas for for games, right? Like
Yeah, it's like people go like, "Oh, but it's not real gaming." I'm like, "Yeah, but look at they've got a movie, dude. Angry Birds."
It's funny when Angry Birds came out. Sorry about you probably remember on the PC there used to be a game with a cannon.
Yeah, I
Yeah, and
remember
that's
that.
I was like, that's exactly what Angry Birds is.
Exactly.
Cannon game, yeah.
There was this canon game, and there was also, I think, a lot of these games are pretty similar. I think they've just changed how they've just adapted it to like how it works on the mobile, like
Yeah.
with the touch and everything. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the last game I played was Max Payne 2. That's how old I am.
Mhm.
My gaming knowledge is. So um, yeah, that's amazing. And, one thing that resonated with me when you talked about Chef's Table, Josh, was I feel like the whole medium of food and chefs is so unforgiving. Like,
Mhm.
especially for them, is like if there's a consumer who goes there and doesn't like the food or presentation or anything of that sort that the chef created, they will just not come back again or not give it another try, for most part, for that
Um,
matter,
like when it
it's
comes to food, you can't really tell your customer that flavor is subjective.
yeah.
They'll go like, yeah, you burnt the steak. There's no way around this.
Exactly, exactly. Amazing. And you told initially about Christopher Nolan's pre-Dunkirk era. What changed after Dunkirk for you, Aaron?
You know what was a thing I started noticing, because I remember when I saw Dunkirk come out, and it just felt different. And I went to go read up, and the key difference, and it's kind of a bit reflective of our situation, but I'm like, the key difference after Dunkirk is Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan's brother, who previously worked on the stories. He left, or like they just stopped working together from that point on. I
Hmm.
don't know for whatever reason, but I think Jonathan Nolan went off to do his own thing. And I just felt that after that point, the movies lacked heart.
Hmm.
I know he wanted to do these more historical kind of things, and then Tenet as well, but that was something to me that was so important about the Prestige. Like, which Jonathan Nolan wrote the story for. Memento was based off a short story that Jonathan Nolan wrote. Um, the Dark Knight and the Dark Knight trilogy, Jonathan Nolan worked on the story for those. And I feel like the two of them combined, Christopher's directorial vision combined with Jonathan Nolan's script, was what really made those films stand out to me.
Hmm. Hmm. No, you're right. Funny thing, like Christopher Nolan, even before that, used to get a lot of criticism around his movies being really like devoid of emotion or like being a bit cold.
Mm.
And you're absolutely right. Like I think it's maybe Jonathan Nolan just infusing a bit of heart into the script of
Mm.
movies. Maybe not enough for a lot of viewers, but now you're like, as much as I wanted to love Oppenheimer, it was a bit of a slog to watch. Uh,
I think another problem that sometimes creative face, like the more successful you get, you have less restrictions on what you can do. It's like with every success, you have more freedom to like, yeah, we can do that, we can do that. And
Yeah,
I actually feel that is counterproductive. I'm not obviously like when you struggle too much, it's no good, but it's I feel like you get the most creative when you limit yourself.
mm,
And in fact, once you reach a certain level of success, it then falls on you to impose those limitations.
that is very true. That is especially true with with Robert Rodriguez's work, right? Like if you see
Mm,
his early work, El Mariachi is probably his best movie ever. Like it was made in $6,000.
mm,
Even George Miller, for that matter, like the best Mad Max movie is The Road Warrior. He got like 12,000 Australian dollars to make that movie.
mm.
Yeah, you know, so yeah, they did some of the best work when obviously like Furiosa and all the new movies are beautiful, but with those special effects, you just lose that one, like a little bit of that feel to it when
Mm.
like that comes with the original that grit. Like if you see the original Mad Max, is so gritty, it's so grimy, it's so dirty looking. It just reminds you of like dusty outback, and and yeah, what life would be if there's extreme heat and lack of resources.
I
Just the
think
vibe.
you
Yeah,
could say the same thing about the first Jurassic Park. Even though it's obviously they have a lot of money, but a lot of things still weren't that possible yet. CG was they basically invented it at that time. They were kind of inventing it as they went along, so you had to be really selective in how often you used it.
that's very, very true. And even like when they didn't have the liberty of that amazing special effects, the animatronics did a lot
Yeah,
of heavy
Mm.
lifting, and
Puppet
they
work.
did yeah, exactly. It still holds up. That's
yes.
Mm, mm,
amazing.
I still
Yeah,
think the first one is better than anything they've done since.
yeah,
mm. That's that's something that I really found. I remember there was a period when Josh was like, "You haven't seen the old." He was film shaming me because he's like, "Oh, you studied film and you haven't seen this." And so like we rewatched like Jumanji, the original, and
mm,
even when I went back to go watch Jaws, and there's something you can also see it in the way actors will respond to it.
yeah.
That there's something physical, there's something tangible to work with, and that to me, haven't seen the latest Beetlejuice, but the original Beetlejuice, just brilliant. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I was watching Terminator 2 recently, and it's obviously the action scenes in that movie are still like there's the practical ones, especially like obviously the special effects are very dated for this day and age, and there are things that you're like that take you out of the movie because there's obviously they don't look good anymore, but the actual action scenes where like that those the when they're riding through the canal, and
yes,
there's a truck chase scene. It's just so good, like it's all practical, it's
yeah.
still so very well done. Yeah,
Yeah, there's a tension that I think is irreplaceable, and it's funny because this reminds me of if we sort of connect the dots back to comics. I think that comics sometimes they don't get these restrictions, right?
yeah,
Because you can draw anything, which can be a massive benefit. But I think it can also work to a disadvantage that when the world is at your fingertips, that we can draw anything and we can take you to different worlds and different times and all that. I feel like sometimes stories get a bit thrown in the back seat
mm,
because there's all this sort of decorative aesthetics that it's like, yeah, it's a sci-fi story, it's a fantasy story. Um,
yeah,
but then the emphasis starts going into the sci-fi, starts going into the fantasy, and sometimes the story it's a bit neglected. It's just the way
mm,
I found.
yeah,
Um,
that's
I'll give
very
one
true.
specific example. Was there's this writer I really like who wrote on Spawn, and when he was given a script, he worked really well with writing, sort of really fleshing out and setting the scene and having these engaging moments. But when it came to him getting to write his own story, he liked fantasy. So he
Mm,
wrote a fantasy like medieval Spawn the Dark Ages. And I just felt that Spawn the Dark Ages did not have the same heart and moments of tension and connection as compared to when he was sort of had a bit more direction. His job was to focus on the story.
Nice. That's fantastic.
Mm.
That's actually a good segue because I wanted to ask you guys about some of the characters in Gods Among Men, and like how did you come up with those characters and what those characters are, in the story.
Um, the Gods Among Men, how it came about with the story, like it's based off some personal experience which we are not really revealing at this stage how we personally know about this story. But that gives a grounding to all of the characters. I guess, look, if anybody did just a little bit of digging, it's not hard to figure it out. um,
Some
That's a
people
hint
have.
to our
some people
viewers.
have, yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you watch some of these interviews with us, or if you anybody who knows us and read the comic, you work it out fairly quickly.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a hint to the readers. Get this comic and read about it, and read it, and then ask us more about
Literally,
these things.
a lot of it's as let's like get the comic, read it, and then just a Google search. But I think we feel like we leave a lot of obvious clues along the
Mm.
way, and but then it's crazy how even as when we first did the Kickstarter, we were like, oh, we wanted to do this special thing where it's a mystery card with a riddle on it. And
Ah.
to date, it's been quite a few months since the people have received those cards, and we still have a couple of them
Mm.
around.
Mm.
No one's figured out the riddle yet, and I'm just like, I think we need to make a post to address this to kind of coax uh, people in the right direction.
We left a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
in the back of the comic book. One thing we did was that there are QR codes that bring you
Nice.
to other mediums. It brings you to music, which if you listen to the music, check out the lyrics, it would expand on it, and it also brings you to some hidden videos on YouTube,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
there's little clues. Like if you look at the upload date, they date. It's not something that we made up today. Some of them, the upload dates date back to early 2000s.
Wow.
So that was our way of you know bringing life back to a lot of the work we had created over the years because it was all part of the same story.
No, no, absolutely. I think I always love when comic books have other artifacts
Hmm.
attached to them. It just expands the world and the story by that much, So
We love
yeah,
things like National Treasure and that kind of Easter egg conspiracy hunt thing. So I do feel like as the issues go on, and again, the work that we set up here in issue one, we're going to be throwing back to things like the significance of the first page or the significance of the first few pages, and then I think that's kind of this is the seed, and
yeah,
we're gonna keep throwing back to it to kind of go, hey, did you guys remember back then when there was this? Well, it pays off now, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. No, I really like that. I really like that. Amazing. We're coming close to time, but before we go, I would love for you guys to make an elevator pitch of the book to people, and why should they buy it, and all that jazz. I'll give you the stage, and you can take
You
it up
should.
from here.
How used to.
Okay. You should get Gods Among Men because there's nothing else like it. I know that it's not the conventional pitch. Normally, people would say this is a book for people who like this or that, and anyone who's read it will say that, yeah, I've never seen anything like this in the comic medium. It might have similarities to things you like, but it often gets compared to Breaking Bad, but it's not that at all. So
Nice.
I think, just for sheer intrigue, get one to find out and you won't be disappointed.
I approve.
You know what? What I have to tell you that some of the best things in every medium are created by people who are not from that medium originally, because they're not bound to the constraints, or they don't have any preconceived structures to work with, for the lack of better word. So
Yeah.
you can come fresh with a very new perspective to a medium and create something that's hasn't been done before. So I love to tell this story. I've told this a few times. There's this artist, Bernard Kreckstein. I don't know if you know his work, but he used to make, obviously he was a comic book artist, but he hated comic books a lot because he was a he was a professor of art at Columbia University, and comics is kind of frowned upon by all the elitists, like in both art and writing and literature and everywhere. So his all his colleagues hated him for doing comics, but for him, comics paid really well because Stan Lee was at the top of his game, Marvelous was at the top of his game in the 80s. Uh, but what that led Bernard Kreckstein to do was, like, he just started creating these really wacky panels. Like he broke his half of his page into like 15 panels, and one action shot would play in like 15 different panels. Like if the sky is falling, he'll break it down into smaller and smaller panels for the effect, and it
Mm.
just created that beautiful effect in comics. He just invented something completely new, which never existed before. One of his best work is The Master Race. It's part of EC Comics catalog. You must check it out. It's really good. And like there's nothing like it out there even now. A lot of people try to replicate his style and stuff, but that OG comic panels that he created, like they're just so fantastic. And after that, he quit comics. He stopped making them because he hated it so much.
Made his mark, and then I'm gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the reasons for him to hate comics was Stanley. So, I don't know. Yeah. He's not a
I like
mess to work with. Yeah. Sorry,
I
you were
like
saying, Mac.
I like that he did what he wanted to do and then he finished. I think that's something that a lot of comics could benefit from, to have
That's
a
very true.
actual ending and then move on and do something else. Because
Same with film and music, even,
yeah,
right? I think if it's a band that has reached their creative limit and they kind of, you know, I feel like Iron Maiden's kind of at that point.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, you guys did really well. It's okay to call it a day, or if directors who keep milking a property till the end, it's like, just let it be great, let it
Yeah.
exist for what it was, and move on.
That's what Mike Portnoy did with Dream Theater, right? He quit Dream Theater for a good 10 years, and then he's coming back now. He's reuniting with the band, and
I'm actually glad he's back now, though. Like,
yeah,
I Mangini is Mangini can play, but he doesn't have what Portnoy has.
Portnoy is the drumming god. I love him.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I'm just waiting for them to finally come back here because that's the
Yeah,
only concert in a while that I'll be like, yeah, I'll go. I want to go to that.
yeah. I love Portnoy. I love Petrucci. I love how both of them play together. Like it's just like their band is fantastic. I just love it. I used to love how Jordan Rudess added some more flair when he joined, but I just they just lost me when Portnoy left. So I agree. I'm looking forward to him coming back. Yeah, and you're right about Iron Maiden too. I've watched them way too many times in the arenas. I'm not going to pay any more money to them till the
Yeah, you're
time
kind of like, all right,
they do it.
we're happy with the hits, but I think the past two albums are kind of like,
Yeah. My favorite Iron Maiden memory is actually a concert called Somewhere Back in Time, where they played all their old songs. They didn't play any new material, and I was like, "This is the best. I love them."
they, they could just do that indefinitely, and I don't think anybody would
No one will complain
yeah,
ever.
no one would complain.
My biggest disappointment has been watching Guns N' Roses live in the last. I think I watched them like a few, like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, Axl Rose should not come back on stage anymore. Like this guy has just lost his voice. Yeah. And the fun thing that the concert that I went to at Olympic Park, Slash started. He just went off on a tangent and started playing Pink Floyd in the middle of the concert, and he just started playing Comfortably Numb. And when he finished that, who was that? The ACDC guy, Angus Young. Yeah, he just came on the stage and they just jammed, and I was like, what the hell is happening here? Like, it's so surreal, like just to watch Slash and Angus Young just jam on the stage together. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is like, I go away, Axl Rose. I'm loving this.
Yeah, just completely change the lineup. We don't need any more singing.
I know. Yeah, amazing, awesome. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, guys. I really appreciate the time today, and
Thank you
Thanks
for
for
having
having
us.
us.
all the best with Anna comic that's coming up. Show us the copy of Gods Among Men.
Yes. So we've got
Yeah, before we go.
the physical copy here. Sorry, the light glare is crazy on this thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pull it out the packet. So yeah,
It seems like a beautifully produced book.
well, look, for us, we really wanted to bring the quality. Yeah, you can
Wow,
see a bit more of the detail. We
so
really
good.
wanted to bring just something, really high quality. Like one thing Josh pointed out was I showed him a couple of these older books, and he didn't like that newsstand paper and everything.
Hmm.
Um, let's see, what can we show?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, even just page one.
Nice. Yeah, and the colors on that page are so rich. It's fantastic.
Yes, our colorist Wilson Go. He's from the Philippines, and he does a really. He's actually very present in the Australian comic scene.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what was really cool to see was how he, a lot of these scenes are just, obviously it's no action scenes. It's a lot of talking, but there's obviously very key information that goes on, and he is able to really bring life to these moments.
Hmm.
You know, even the
Nice.
food centric element.
That's fantastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Are you based in Sydney?
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. So yeah, any of yourself or your viewers, you can find us. What's the stores in Sydney?
Oh, my local comic book shop has one, right? The Comic
The
Shop,
comic shop
Liverpool.
Liverpool, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, stock there. King's Comics. There's another one in Maitland, New South Wales. Yeah, and coming soon to the Comics one. I mean, we've got the
Yes,
digital.
yes, yep. Amazing.
Yeah, so
It'll be on a stands in November when we save it. Yay!
yeah, that's a big thing for us. Like just to really sort of, because obviously there'll be people who watch the other interviews we've done and this one, but then nothing beats, I think, just having a physical presence out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Amazing, guys. Great having you on the show, and all the
Thank
best
you.
for expanding the readership. I hope the comic gets more and more popular. Good for us. Good for you. I
You'll benefit all of us. Yeah.
know.
Benefit the
Amazing.
reader.
Yeah, yeah. And if you read the comic, please do send us the comments, and all the praise and all the good things, all the feedback. We're all ears. Yeah. Thanks a lot, and have a good one. And until next
Thank
time.
you. Have a good day. Cheers.
Good day. See ya.